You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go wild.
They are. I don't know. I haven't seen the web.
Number 322. You both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us?
Not much, because it's a secret.
Is there a secret handshake? Is there a secret code?
I wish there were something secret I could manifest.
322, a secret number?
There are all kinds of secrets.
If this were a dictatorship, it'd be a heck of a lot easier. Just so long as I'm the dictator, 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 I'm the dictator.
On a show that airs in the morning on a program called The Washington Journal. So we'll go over this hit piece that Brian Lamb and Washington Journal engaged in with this professor, and I'll be analyzing what they had to say. And Brian Lamb routinely talks about me. His guests routinely talk about me. And this was the night after I'd been on a national radio show, the second largest radio show in the country, Coast to Coast AM, the second highest number of listeners. And Mr. Lamb said that he'd heard it. And again, he's had guests on before talking about me. And then they kind of went into this whole debunking for an hour. Now, I don't have time to put the entire show on here, obviously, and then analyze all of it. But there were callers going, only stupid black people believe in conspiracy theories. It was ridiculous. You're mentally ill if you believe in a new world order. It was amazing. The new world order is public. Bill Clinton's mentor, the head of political science at Georgetown University, wrote 2 books on it. The Anglo-American Establishment, that gets mentioned later, and Tragedy and Hope. And in Tragedy and Hope, he said, look, the globalists, I've been in their secret documents. I believe in world government. I believe they should be public. This is a great idea. They control the fascists. They control the communists. They control the system. They're the power behind the throne. You've seen presidents give speeches about New World Order. You've read it in most of the big newspapers, how global government's good. And the global government that they're setting up doesn't have a Bill of Rights or a Constitution. The global government they're setting up doesn't have basic freedoms, a Bill of Rights, a Constitution. It's the power of the state. So we'll analyze what Brian Lamb and his minion, the professor, had to say. But before we do that, I wanted to go over a few articles in the mainstream media that are basically damage control and explain why they're now coming forward with these supposed revelations that they're supposedly breaking, and show you how they're putting a unique spin on it. This is an article out of USA Today, and this report came out on April 19th, 2004. NORAD had drills eerily like September 11th, Pentagon Trade Center among imagined targets. Now remember, President Bush has said dozens of times that no one had ever heard of a plan to fly planes in the buildings. No one had ever imagined it. I've got at least 50 media reports going back to 95 about it, where governments were talking about their concerns of this and bringing forward documents. But every time they'd research it, it led back to the CIA and terrorist-funded organizations being used by this government to create the pretext for war and invasions of sovereign countries. And so now suddenly, in USA Today, NORAD had drills eerily like September 11th. 5.5 months before 9/11, Pentagon officials wanted to have a drill of hijacked jets flying into the World Trade Center in Pentagon. But senior White House officials told Pentagon officials that it was too unrealistic, that they didn't want to have the drills. Now, why is the media focusing in on these drills? Because we've been talking about it for years. And what they focus in on is a drill that never happened 5.5 months before 9/11. 2 years ago, 2+ years ago, I got a call from a listener who said he worked at the Pentagon. And he's on air, and he said, Alex, have you seen the Pentagon website? We had a drill 2 years before 9/11 of hijacked jets flying into the Pentagon and World Trade Center. Not 5.5 months before, not a canceled drill. They had a drill. And here is the original screenshot of the Pentagon website. After we posted a link to the Pentagon website, 24 hours later, they took this down. I wonder why they would do it. They say here, contingency planning, Pentagon MASCAL exercise simulates scenarios and preparing for emergencies. And it shows an image of the Pentagon on fire, hit by a hijacked jet. And we link to it because somebody in the Pentagon tells us about it. It's public, and suddenly it's taken down. You're asking, how do we have a copy of it? Well, this is from prisonplanet.com. We were smart enough to save it, as we do all articles, as soon as we found it. Then I had Stanley Hilton, Bob Dole's former chief of staff, on my radio show twice. He's suing Bush not for prior knowledge, but for running 9/11. He has 400 plus of the victims' families on his ticket suing Bush. You never hear about Stanley Hilton, do you? And he said, about a year and a half ago on my broadcast, he said, I've talked to military officials, people at NORAD. There was a drill on 9/11 at 8:30 in the morning. And they told me that that was used as the stand-down order of, oh, these hijacked jets, it's just a drill. See how convenient that is. So USA Today doesn't talk about the drill they held 2.5 years ago. Well, 2 years before 9/11, now over 4 years ago. They don't talk about the drill they had on the morning of September 11th run by the CIA, which was actually the smokescreen for the stand-down of NORAD. They don't talk about that. What they talk about is a drill 5.5 months before 9/11, which was canceled. And again, here it is, right out of USA Today. NORAD had drills eerily like September 11th, Pentagon Trade Center among imagined targets. And it says, oh, the Pentagon and the White House thought that it was too unrealistic. Here's an ABC News spin piece where they try to explain all of this away just a few nights ago. And then on top of it, at the end of it, they say, oh, hey, now we're going to find out why there were no fighters stationed around there to protect the buildings. There were fighters all over the place at least 8 bases loaded with missiles. They were ordered to stand down because it was, quote, just a drill. Go ahead and go to Peter Jennings, engaging in damage control. Here it is.
We're going to take a closer look tonight at another example of where, despite the conventional wisdom, there were people in the United States who actually were preparing to defend against the kind of attacks which occurred here on 9/11. The North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD for short, has been defending the skies over the U.S. and Canada for almost 50 years, 46 to be precise. USA Today reports that in the 2 years before the attacks on September the 11th, NORAD conducted exercises using hijacked airliners as weapons. And one target was the World Trade Center. Here's ABC's Brian Ross.
President Bush has said again and again that no one could have imagined what Osama bin Laden ordered for September 11th.
We knew he hated us. But there was nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings on such a massive scale.
But that turns out not to be true. U.S. military planners did envision and practice those very scenarios. As reported by USA Today, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, conducted exercises with fighter jets, simulating hijacked planes flown into the World Trade Center in the 2 years before the attacks.
There are a lot of good people throughout the bureaucracy that were worried, were thinking about it, were trying to think outside the box.
Pentagon planners also envisioned the attack on the Pentagon 5 months before it happened. According to this April 2001 Pentagon email, Air Force officials wanted a war game, having a terrorist group hijack a commercial airline and fly it into the Pentagon. The email was obtained by the nonprofit group Project for Government Oversight.
The people who gave it to us were clearly concerned for some period of time that this kind of event could happen. And they were pushing very strongly on trying to exercise this event.
The idea was to check response times to launch fighter jets. But according to the Pentagon email, the plan was ultimately rejected by senior Pentagon officials as too unrealistic.
It certainly does not reflect as well on the policymakers that may have been saying that there was no conceived way that anybody could be thinking of this.
Still to come are questions, big questions, about NORAD's response on the day of the attack. Why, despite all the exercises and the planning, Peter, jet fighters were not in place anywhere near New York or Washington.
Quite an amazing story. Many thanks.
Jet fighters were not in place anywhere near New York or Washington.
Quite an amazing story. Many thanks.
I knew he hated us. But there was nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
This is all very upsetting to me. I get very angry about this. The lies. I could analyze that little 3-minute newscast for days. Why there weren't fighters in place? I have stacks of mainstream news articles, the Pentagon's own reports. 20 minutes in a car from New York, there's one of the biggest U.S. military bases in the world that has responsibility for fighter intercept of hijacked jets, you name it. Hundreds of fighter aircraft. They were ordered to stand down because of a drill on the morning of 9/11 by the CIA. And we have those articles from the Associated Press posted on Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. Now understand, there was a drill on November 3rd, 2000 by the Pentagon of flying planes in the World Trade Center and Pentagon. This is from the Pentagon website from 2000. We posted it on the website 2 years ago when we found it because of a Pentagon tip, and then it was taken down. But we screen saved it 2 years ago, 2 years before 9/11, now 4+ years. Then you have the drill on the morning of 9/11. But the news isn't talking about that. By the way, the drill on 9/11 was reported by the Associated Press. I just told you earlier that we broke that story with our government sources before the Associated Press. After we reported that there was a CIA drill that ordered NORAD to stand down, damage control again went into gear, 2 AP articles within weeks saying, yeah, there was a CIA drill. The CIA's now announced that morning at 8:30 in the morning of exactly what happened on 9/11 happening, but it's all just a big coincidence. Then the second AP article said, not that it was hijackers in the first drill, which they first said, but, oh, just planes off course. But the actual program did say it was hijackers. So this is all damage control. They're coming out now saying NORAD had drills eerily like September 11th. This is all being done to condition you. So when you hear us talk about planes flying into buildings, when you hear us talking about drills doing that, and drills on 9/11, and drills 2 years before 9/11, when you hear that, you'll think, oh, yeah, I already heard about that on the news. It was just a coincidence. No, forget the drill that never happened. There are at least 2 other drills we know happened. One on the morning of 9/11. And again, that was used as a stand-down order because the people in NORAD aren't bad. They're good patriots. But if they're told stand down, these 4 planes off course with their transponders turned off for over an hour, normally if your Cessna's off course for 5 minutes, the tower will call you and say, we're launching fighter planes. It's always been that way for the last couple decades. My father's a small plane pilot. I've been in the plane with him when he goes off course a little bit, and FAA calls up asking what you're doing. They micromanage you. But magically on 9/11, this doesn't happen. With Payne Stewart, the golfer, it did. Within 5 minutes, F-16s are launched. Within 18 minutes, they've surrounded him. But not on 9/11. That's because they, quote, ran a drill on 9/11 of exactly what happened on 9/11 happening magically and used that to order NORAD to stand down. Now, I have this from people inside the government before the AP even reported it. But a lot of you said, oh, there was no drill of flying hijacked planes into buildings. President Bush wouldn't lie, and here it is admitting the drill. But they're not focusing in on the other admitted drills. Very serious. All right, now we're going to go to a C-SPAN piece that was done on March 12th, in the early morning hours, March 12th of 2004. And Brian Lamb of C-SPAN and this professor do a hit piece on me. And notice that they don't have any facts. They don't have any data. They're saying broad things. They're using labels. There's a lot of disinformation here. So we're going to go ahead and go through that. Here is C-SPAN. And I'll be stopping this, making comments throughout it. Again, there's Brian Lamb on C-SPAN and doing his little hit piece, and we're going to try to counter it in a little bit of time we have left.
Thanks. Coming up at the top of the hour, we're going to talk about conspiracies. On my way in this morning, I was listening to a radio show that many of you probably hear overnight called Coast to Coast AM. George Norrie is the host. They had Alex Jones as the guest, and Mr. Jones is the fellow who has a radio talk show based down in Texas, I believe. You can hear it in some places around the United States. And he was talking about how all the decisions have been made at the Bohemian Grove Club out in California. That's where all the people involved in the worldwide leadership of governments and where they make the decisions, including President Bush and his father, meet out at the Bohemian Grove, make the decisions. I think I heard him say this morning that the George Bush president and Dick Cheney sealed the deal out there at the Bohemian Grove Club. There are plenty of websites that you all...
Okay. And again, I'm going to be stopping this and making comments. I went out to Bohemian Grove in July of 2000. We went in. All the rumors were true. They were doing occult ceremonies. It's been on national TV now. That's all admitted. And I get home, and my mother calls me and says, son, it was just on CNN that Dick Cheney's going to be Bush's running mate. Colin Powell told the Associated Press this while at the Bohemian Grove, that the decision had been made there between Bush Sr., George Herbert Walker, and Dick Cheney. And then I'm driving down the road, and I hear it on local ABC radio on KLBJ. And later we found the news article. And Brian Lamb later brings this back up and says, well, what a conspiracy theory. Stuff didn't happen at the Grove. Why, Dick Cheney was the head of the Vice President Selection Committee. Why would he, be selected at the Grove? The Grove admits in documents they've released to the University of California at Berkeley, kind of their mouthpiece, that, we hatched the Manhattan program here for the nuclear bomb. Well, actually the A-bomb that grew into the hydrogen bomb. And, we hatched Star Wars in 1979 before you heard of it. And we hatched perestroika here. I mean, this is all mainstream news. But I'm a conspiracy theorist. I'm a conspiracy theorist because I believe there's a new world order because presidents are saying it on national television, and at least 50 groups are putting out publications calling for world government. Please continue.
We've said conspiracy is our topic at the top of the hour, and looking at Alex Jones's, and he's by no means the only person involved in this discussion of conspiracies. He makes a living off of it. But on his website, for instance, he has a listing, the impending staged capture of bin Laden. That's a lot of things people feel are organized behind the scenes with the Bilderbergers, the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Masons. You can keep going down the list. And the Illuminati, One World Government, New World Order, Skull and Bones. Thanks for your calls during this first hour when we open the phones and let anybody talk about all these different issues. We are going to switch the topic to conspiracy. And on your screen is Professor Michael Barkin. He's in Syracuse. And I want to start by first saying good morning, but asking Professor Barkin what his favorite conspiracy is.
Well, the favorite conspiracy that I would have as a scholar of conspiracies is simply the one that tries to explain the most.
What's the cover of your book has the big eye on it? What's that mean?
Well, that, of course, is the reverse side of the Great Seal of the United States, and the image is taken off of the back of the $1 bill. If you look at a lot of the conspiracy theories that are out there, they tend to regard that so-called all-seeing eye at the top of the pyramid as a symbol of the Illuminati, the...
Okay, let's go back over just a few of the things that Lamb said. He comes on and he says, Mr. Jones makes his living at this. Well, what do you make your living at, Mr. Brian Lamb? I mean, I love that. Peter Jennings gets $7.5 million a year reading off a teleprompter, and that's okay. And Cheney makes billions off his control of Halliburton while he's vice president with no bids allowed, but that's okay. But I'm bad because I'm a muckraker and I expose corruption. I love that argument. I'm the only guy I know who makes documentary films and tells people to make copies of them. Who says it's not copyrighted. I mean, these people are sick. Then he goes, oh, Alex Jones says impending stage capture of bin Laden. Yeah, a White House official told me that over 2 years ago. I wrote a news story about it 2 years ago. It's on prisonplanet.com. And now Madeleine Albright in December of 2003 says that everybody knows in Washington they've already got bin Laden. They're going to roll him out. Then Senator Grassley says it. Top generals say it in newspapers. This is all in the last few months in 2003 into 2004. They may now not have the stage capture because we've exposed it. Then there's the questions of how do they have the stage capture? He died of natural kidney failure, according to my White House source. Could be disinfo. I said that 2 years ago. And they're going to roll him out, his dead body on ice, say they killed him in Tora Bora. And then magically we start hearing they're right on his tail in Tora Bora. They're going to catch him for the election. I'm just going off the facts here. Just like I told you about the drills at NORAD. Just like I told you there was video at Oklahoma City of McVeigh with all these Arabs that work for the FBI and the BATF down the street and their bomb gear. And here it is in the Associated Press today. Oklahoma City bomb document cites video of multiple suspects. And they declare national security on the video. I've been saying that. That's in my first video I made in '97. I'm the conspiracy theorist. Let's go back to these establishment pomps trying to do damage control.
Eye at the top of the pyramid as a symbol of the Illuminati, the secret society who allegedly are masterminding the New World Order takeover.
Well, let me start by asking you also what a conspiracy is.
I would regard a conspiracy belief as the belief that there is some organization operating covertly to reach evil or malevolent ends.
Overnight, I was telling the audience earlier, I was listening to this radio program that has millions of listeners overnight called Coast to Coast AM. George Norrie is the host. It used to be hosted by Art Bell. And they talk about UFOs. Overnight, they had a gentleman on by the name of Alex Jones, who has a talk show in Texas, I think, and it's heard in communities around the United States. And he was talking about the Bohemian Grove Club, as if that's where it all happens. That's where all the decisions are made. There are thousands of people go there, and there's some kind of a ceremony surrounding an owl and all that. Have you followed?
Okay. Let me move quick here. Don't have a lot of time. Number one, the biggest conspiracy is to say that there are groups that want total control and to dominate. Everybody wants to rule the world, as the song goes. The whole world, history, is empires and dictators and emperors trying to have world dominion. The wildest conspiracy theory is that there's a New World Order group that wants a world government. The CFR's own publication, Foreign Affairs, bi-monthly, every issue says they want a new world order, a world government. Undersecretary of State Strobe Talbot, we're going to get rid of national sovereignty. It wasn't a good idea. All these quotes, all these comments, there's literally thousands of them. Multiple presidents calling for new world orders. Prime ministers calling for new world orders. And the ultimate conspiracy is to say that there's a group that wants a new world order. The UN, the World Federalist Society, the CFR, the Trilateral Commission, all these groups call for a new world order, and then he gets into Space aliens. I don't talk about that, folks. Some people do. I talk about stuff I can prove. So they try to mix that together, the provable with the unproven. And then he goes to the professor and goes, what about Bohemian Grove? And the professor goes, oh, there was a crazy guy, went in there with a gun and was going to do all this stuff because he heard it on Alex Jones' show. Richard McCaslin, I believe, is a government operative. From the evidence. I can't prove that. Some Marine who worked at Six Flags as a stuntman tries to come to Texas and tries to meet with me. I refuse. He'd show up down here at the studio. I say, everybody, that's a Fed if I've ever seen one. And I don't just say that about people. Then all of a sudden, he goes into the Bohemian Grove in the middle of winter. When he told the police and the local paper, he knew no one was there. The globalists are there in the summer. He goes in dressed up in a Captain America outfit with a skull mask over it, yelling Alex Jones, waving a crossbow and an unloaded rifle, and the police come and get him, and he goes into custody saying, Alex Jones, Alex Jones, Alex Jones. And thank God I never was involved with this guy or would talk to him, because it was a sting op from the beginning. But if people are doing crazy stuff in the woods, it's going to attract crazies. Let's say McCaslin's really just a crazy. It's going to attract crazies. It's not my fault if I report on the news what somebody's doing and nuts are attracted to it. Nuts are attracted to other nuts, if he's just a nut. But it doesn't fit that. So go back to it, please.
Oh. Yes, I have, even though the show is on past my bedtime. But Alex Jones has been talking about this for quite a while. The Bohemian Grove, of course, is a privately owned redwood grove up in Sonoma County north of San Francisco, where every summer there is a get-together of the wealthy and well-placed, all male, who get together for general cavorting, socializing, lectures, symposia, and so on, in an atmosphere that is completely removed from public scrutiny. Alex Jones and some others have suggested for a long time that there are all sorts of nefarious rituals that go on. And as a matter of fact, a couple of years ago, and I talk about this incident actually in my book, someone who had listened to the Alex Jones show about this was arrested within the Bohemian Grove, very heavily armed, because he said he was trying to bring attention to what he thought were human sacrifices that were being committed by the elite who attend these gatherings.
What about Skull and Bones?
Skull and Bones obviously gets a good deal of attention simply because A, it's secret, and B, the members are people who often turn up in high places later in life, and we'll certainly hear lots about it this year because both George W. Bush and John Kerry were members.
The reason Skull and Bones is important is because we've now seen 3 presidents from there, a bunch of different CIA directors, the heads of the big banking establishment. They admit they do macabre satanic rituals. It was caught on video by the New York Observer. It's been on national television, throat slitting, hailing Satan. It was on television, and they admit it. I stuck at a Bohemian Grove. That's the type of weird garbage they're doing too. Ritualistic mock murders. And they just move over that and go, every time they mention the Grove now in the New York Times or on C-SPAN, it's, well, a crazy guy went in there and said he heard it from Alex Jones. And then now that's what we hear about Bohemian Grove. But Skull and Bones is important because they swore an oath to Skull and Bones above all others. Then they ask him what the Illuminati is, and he says, oh, founded by the secret German societies. Exactly, that then admittedly founded Skull and Bones and the Bohemian Grove. They're the crazy people. They're the weirdos. We're just exposing it.
That are out there now tend to place a lot of emphasis on the notion that there are interlocking secret organizations that hold the real power in the world, and because of its secrecy and because of the elite background of many of its members, Skull and Bones is a prime candidate for that.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go wild.
I'm sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the website.
Number 322?
First of all, he's not the nominee.
We say that they're interlocking. The heads of the Trilateral Commission are the heads of the CFR, are the heads of the Bilderberg Group, are the heads of the Royal Institute of International Affairs. They all have the exact same policies, the exact same thing they call for, world government openly. And then we talk about it, and we're nuts. It's like the national news announcing that police all need to have microchips in their hands to have guns, and that all the citizens need it. And it's all over the Associated Press, Wired News, you name it. But we're still kooks to talk about it, because preemptively they conditioned the public that you're a kook to be against it. This is just disgusting. Back to the tape.
On those conspiracy theories that posit the notion that there is an organization seeking world control. Obviously, there have been genuine conspiracies, some of them successful, some of them unsuccessful. But the more sweeping the claims are for what a conspiracy purports to do, the more difficult it becomes to either prove it or disprove it. And in my view, the more skeptical one has to be of the claims.
Define Illuminati.
The Illuminati were a small quasi-Masonic group founded in Central Europe in 1776 by a law professor named Adam Weishaupt. It grew to perhaps membership in the low four figures, largely in German-speaking parts of Central Europe. It was associated with an opposition to monarchical absolutism, and because of that, it began to attract the hostility of the governments in the countries where it was operating. So by around the late 1780s, it had effectively been suppressed and put out of business. What has happened since then, and particularly since the 1790s, is that a body of literature has grown up claiming that the Illuminati, in fact, were not disbanded, that they had a continued existence, that they exist today, and that they have essentially been responsible for much of the disruption in world history.
Where do they hang out, so to speak?
Well, if you look at the contemporary conspiracy theories, they tend to be linked to a range of other organizations. The ones that come up with some frequency are the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations, the UN, the Federal Reserve. There's the sense of not a single conspiracy, but of conspiracies in a way nested within one another like Russian dolls.
And does the Bilderberger Group fit in that too?
They certainly do. In fact, in the more complex and Baroque conspiracy theories, there may be literally dozens of organizations that are regarded as components with the Illuminati at or near the summit of some kind of...
Okay. At the Illuminati, at the top, or the summit, why is their symbol for Time Warner and CBS and the Total Information Awareness Network? It's that all-seeing eye on the top of that pyramid looking down on you. That's the Illuminati's admitted symbol. That eye of Lucifer, that all-knowing elite at the top of the pyramid that symbolizes command and control and compartmentalization. It's just that simple. And the Illuminati wasn't some new idea. It was elites that were using that just as one shill or one front at that particular time. You look at who runs the IMF, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, the UN, all these organizations, the top people running those are the top people in the private banks, in the Federal Reserve, in the Council on Foreign Relations, in the Trilateral Commission. It's just a couple thousand people, and they're just high-level managers. There's just a few hundred families, really even less than that. Bilderberg Group meetings are secret. They'll have them in France. They'll admit it's a meeting. The army's called out to guard them. Queen of England, the Rothschilds, they all go in. Chinese leaders, the richest Arabs, they all go in. They come out. Then their talking heads go on TV and announce the new policy. Their own documents, their own publications of the CFR called for world government, called for taking your guns, called for all this. We're just talking about something public here. But again, over and over again, they know you don't want to take responsibility or fight it or get involved. So they have their talking heads go, oh, no, it doesn't exist. You didn't see that on the sitcoms. You didn't see that on Fox News. You didn't see that at the halftime show at the football game. They have a problem. The C-SPAN audience is intelligence. They watch C-SPAN, the C-SPAN audience. They see CFR meetings every week where they call for New World Order and world government. And so they're all calling in going, what do you mean? Go back to it, please.
Here all the time when I listen in and out of these programs, people who sound very rational, very smart and intelligent come up with these very intricate theories.
Yes, sir. Dr. Barkan, I wanted to ask you if you heard anything about the UN and any conspiracy as far as a New World Order. I know there's a lot of Americans that have changed their mind about the UN and as far as our involvement in the UN.
Well, virtually all conspiracy theories that talk about a so-called New World Order give primacy to the UN. That's been a motif that's been there for a long time. It's hard for me, as a matter of fact, to think of a contemporary conspiracy theory that uses the term New World Order that doesn't talk about the UN as having some kind of a central role.
In a moment, I'll ask you about what Alex Jones says is the impending staged capture of bin Laden. We go to Atlantic City.
Okay. Notice there that the caller calls in and talks about the UN and, do you know about this conspiracy? And other callers call in and go, I think the Democrats run the conspiracy. And then Brian Lamb goes, well, wait a minute. Bush talks about a New World Order. Both sides are controlled. Bush is playing the bad cop in Iraq. The UN's going to come in and play the part of the good cop. How do I know this? Globalist white papers are public saying it's all staged. But they know you're not going to stay up till 2 in the morning reading white papers. You're going to go to the topless bar. Go ahead.
You're on the air.
Yes, good morning. I listen to Alan Jones religiously from 2 in the morning till 5 in the morning on Real One Radio on the Internet. If anybody really wants information, he is the man who has it, believe me. I wanted to ask Mr. Barkan about how the passports of the hijackers were found if that 911 building burned up, how 9 of the 19 are still alive in other countries, and how those buildings appear to have been blown up.
Professor, before you answer, let me just ask our caller, why is it that you believe what Alex Jones tells you?
Because he makes a lot of sense. There are just too many coincidences about the whole situation, from George Bush's coup, and Totally, totally. And I watch a lot of history. I watch a lot of PBS. I do not watch propaganda. As Hitler said, it is easier to believe a big lie than a little lie.
But I'm going to press it a little bit more, though. Who is Alex Jones? Why does he have the truth? And why is everything that he says reliable? Do you know anything about him? Do you know where he was born? Do you know how much education he's got?
It just makes sense. Believe me.
It just makes sense.
It just makes sense because the other way just doesn't make sense. And I know there's evil behind the Skull and Bones.
Well, let me ask you this. He says there's an impending stage capture of bin Laden. Do you believe that?
Yeah, everything's staged. Everything that the Skull and Bones do is staged.
Professor.
Well, I guess I would ask first what the basis is for the various assertions about 9/11, because they really run so clearly counter to everything else that's been reported.
Recently, the press secretary...
It all runs so counter to what's been reported. I've been in the studio live for over 2 years, a little bit over 2 years, telling you that in November of 2000, the government ran a drill of flying hijacked jets in the buildings. And where did I get this wild idea? But from the Pentagon's own website. You know, I just went to the Pentagon's website, and they said they did this drill. Military District of Washington, News Contingency, planning Pentagon mass-scale exercise. Then they had a drill on 9/11. I got that from a top lawyer interviewing the military officials at NORAD. And then, oh, I'm a nut, I'm crazy. And then it's in USA Today. See, I'm just, everything we say about 9/11, I told you they had all these tapes of McVeigh with all these Middle Easterners. Of course, they work for the U.S. government. Later to be blamed on Saddam, linked into the right wing. And I'm a nut, but there it is in the Associated Press, reposted the Ossenberger Statesman. Oklahoma City bomb document cites video of multiple suspects. I mean, come on, just go back to these establishment hacks who are lazy and
Bush's father wrote a book.
Can't even come up with sophisticated ways to counter us. Go ahead.
And I've not read it, so I've got to be careful what I say. Allegedly accused LBJ of having JFK murdered. Now, that's all very strong language. The press secretary, I believe, has either not said anything about it or left the impression that he's not in on this, or I don't know. His brother has also been nominated to head up the Medicare operation. Did you read about that? And I know you refer to the Kennedy conspiracies in the book, and what does that do to a story? What does it do to the people that believe all the conspiracies about JFK?
Well, I know of the book only through the news accounts.
Now, I had the father of the White House press secretary on my show for an hour and a half months ago. He was LBJ's personal head lawyer. He was there when LBJ said, I had Kennedy killed. He writes a book about it full of documents. And then that's their response to it. Their response is well, doesn't really say anything. 92% of the people in America believe the government killed Kennedy in major polls. You little 8% can keep saying we're all crazy. We know the facts. To the next clip, please.
Good morning.
Yes, good morning, gentlemen. Yes, my conspiracy theory is that the Democratic Party is behind the New World Order. If you think about it, in order to have the New World Order, you have to have a weak America. You look at the Democrats, they're constantly trying to cut defense, cut intelligence, trying to bring us in line with, like, the European Union. Everything about them is, it's like they basically want us to become a state of the European Union. You see Bush is like, we don't need their permission. And you see all the Democrats like, oh, we need the internationalists. We need
Caller, but let me ask you this, though. George Herbert Walker Bush was, I think, one of the first people to ever talk about the New World Order, and he's a Republican. The Skull and Bones is nothing but a fraternity.
So you see the whole New World Order right there for you. This guy calls in, I believe the Democrats are the New World Order. They're fighting our Lord Bush. they're really trying, the EU's taking over. Bush is signing on, expanding UNESCO, going along with the UN, while on the surface acting like he's fighting with them. And the caller thinks Bush is fighting the New World Order. Michael Savage, fake neocon, says that. Whereas in reality, it's all part of the false left-right paradigm that we're all being sold. And it is the Bushes calling for the New World Order, and this guy's saying that the Republicans are fighting it. I mean, that's the emotional garbage we're talking about. It's very frustrating. Go back to it, please.
And there's nothing more to it than that. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I don't know what goes on in Skull and Bones. The thing about any organization that has restricted visibility, that makes claims to secrecy, is that it's possible to project onto it anything that someone on the outside wishes to, whether it's Skull and Bones or...
So he says he doesn't know anything about Skull and Bones, but we're projecting onto it. We've got video of them throat-slitting, worshiping Satan, and they say it's a mock sacrifice. But we're weird. I snuck into Bohemian Grove and got footage of the Moloch worship, the Canaanite human sacrifice god. It's admitted. But I'm projecting onto it. He says he doesn't know anything about it, but then he tells us, the public, that we're wrong and projecting something onto it. One of the callers of the show says, well, what about Carroll Quigley, the big professor at Georgetown, who was Bill Clinton's mentor, who Bill Clinton, by the way, thanked in his first State of the Union address. What about Carroll Quigley? He wrote the Anglo-American Connection. That was the Anglo-American establishment. And then he also wrote Tragedy and Hope. And Quigley says, I'm New World Order. I've been in the secret documents. I believe in world government. Here's the plan. I don't agree with the establishment saying this should be secret. And Tragedy and Hope's like 900 pages long, laying out all his meetings with the globalists. That's never been refuted. But the globalists are on TV calling for world government. And, of course, the professor just rolls his eyes and, none of it's true, basically. It's incredible. Then a caller calls in and says, Alex Jones, he just does his research. He lives this. You should be researching it. You shouldn't be so ignorant about the facts and then pontificate about what you believe about it. And she talks about how I work tirelessly and how I research this. And I was up late at night grabbing these clips for this live show, and I thought to myself, I appreciate people saying that, because I was up at 2 o'clock. I was up at 2 o'clock in the morning grabbing these clips to play them here live and comment on them.
You're next. Thanks for waiting.
Thank you, Brian, for your good work. This is the Prairie Populist. I'd like to have the professor talk about 2 books by Professor Quigley, who taught at Georgetown, taught Bill Clinton, as a matter of fact. His first was, I think, called The Anglo-American Connection, and it's very revealing, tracing New York people, I suppose, in the upper echelons, back to English connections and ultimately Cecil Rhodes starting the Rhodes system. The other I can't is his magisterial history of the United States, in which he admits being privy to this group. He doesn't identify them, saying that they do exist, and he actually is somewhat sympathetic to their views. Now, I can't remember the name of that, but maybe if you'd mention that in the Anglo-American Connection, people could really read up something professional on this. And remember, Freud said there are no accidents.
Thanks.
Well, there is what might be termed at least a semi-scholarly conspiracy literature. In other words, a conspiracy literature that does pay some attention to the normal canons of proof. On the other hand, the response to it, whether in the form of responses to Carroll Quigley or others who write in that genre, has still been a good deal of skepticism.
Good morning. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Brian. Hi, Mr. Barkin, or Dr.
Hi.
Barkin. I've just two things I'd like to bring up for you to think over. It seems to me, Mr. Barkin, that it's your job to know about, as much as you can possibly know about Skull and Bones and other, secret societies. If you set yourself up as an expert, I would think that you would, Alex Jones is an expert because he lives every moment of his life is exposing these, people. And
Do you believe him, by the way, Hamilton?
well, it just resonates. It rings true. But please let me just make this other point. Just because it's a conspiracy theory doesn't mean that it isn't valid. Now look at what 40 years how much information 40 years has brought out about the JFK assassination that was considered a balderdash, in the beginning. It's human nature to look at things, especially if you are extremely intellectual like Mr. Barkin. Brian, for example, if you could bring somebody on that isn't so left-brained, who is almost just closed-minded completely because of their intellect. Their intellect is so strong that they cannot see that there's truth to this. It might not be completely true, not every detail, but the general idea.
Let me give you an example. This morning I was listening to Alex Jones on this show, Coast to Coast AM. He's talking about
I heard the show too.
He's talking about Bohemian Grove and the importance of all these people meeting. And then he makes a statement that President Bush, when he wasn't president, sealed the deal with Dick Cheney there at the Bohemian Grove to be his vice presidential candidate. And when I was listening, I said to myself, Vice President Cheney was the head of his committee to find a vice president. Why did they need to go to Bohemian Grove to settle this deal?
Brian, but look at all of the things that we have found out about Dick Cheney as being the CEO of Halliburton and things like that.
Well, we knew that before the election.
I mean, that's dishonest. It's not.
What's dishonest?
It's not up front. Cheney is a very secretive man.
Well,
you don't know.
But you mentioned Halliburton.
He hides himself.
You mentioned Halliburton. What's secret about that? We knew he had headed Halliburton before the election.
It's a conflict of interest. Nobody will say the word. It is a conflict of interest for him to be in the oil business and be a multi-gazillionaire.
All right, thanks.
And we're not going to stop. We're covering the facts. We're covering the truth. We're exposing it. And a lot of people are catching on and waking up. And I like a lot of the stuff that Brian Lamb does. I think he's better than a lot of the mainstream media. I've been a supporter of C-SPAN. But he continually talks about me, continually snipes at me for years with other guests that I've never even exposed here on the air. I've never even responded to it. I've tried to get the professor on the radio. I've tried to get Lamb on the radio to talk to him about all this. I've tried to say, hey, have me on your show if you talk about me all the time, and it hasn't happened. So I had to come on here and expose their hit piece. Thanks for joining us. God bless.